It's not always about money, and it's not on a day of the week that we decide to lay by Him and store. Now, obviously, this is the second portion of the study that I'm doing. The previous video was about the aspect of the Last Supper and these type of things, and how, and we define what the first day of the week meant, especially in the time of Paul and these types of things, and how they counted the times. And today we're going to take a little verse. We're just going to briefly touch on this. This is not going to take long at all. And this is 1 Corinthians 16:2. And a lot of people like to take 1 Corinthians 16:2 as tithes and offerings. They think it's talking about collections of money into an offering plate on Sundays. And again, the first day of the week, this was to be done upon the first day of the week, because on the Sabbath, obviously, it was a time of rest. It was a time of restoration. That's why Paul basically said that there be no gatherings when I come. Okay, this was to be done in the privacy of their own homes, and rightly so, because I don't think it's our business, and plus also it'll puff us up to see what each person is laying alongside himself in storage for gatherings. This should be a free offering. This should be a free giving. Not something of 10% this and 10% that and giving money to the poor. It's not about money, folks. I mean, what's money going to do? And money's just simply not going to do anything. I mean, you give a poor man money, and how's that going to profit him? You give him shelter or clothing or food, that's going to profit him more than money. Okay? And again, this was to be done upon the first day of the week, not on the Sabbath, because people were observing and keeping and guarding that Sabbath day, especially the early church during this time. It wasn't Sunday, okay? Otherwise, it would have said upon the second day of the week, wouldn't it? All right? But it doesn't say that, so upon the first day of the week. So, real simple, very simple here. The phrase "lay by him and store," the meaning in the Greek is that each one is to lay something alongside himself, storing it. The Greek word "parahautao" means alongside himself or by him. Para is found in other English words such as parallel or parable. Okay, it carries the idea of being alongside something. The second part of the Greek word is the pronoun him. All right. Therefore, something is being laid alongside oneself. What Paul is doing is he's instructing each disciple to lay something away at home. Okay. Now, not to put out publicly all these public collections and gatherings, putting things in a collection plate. This was to be done at the home. All right. And all you have to do is, again, read a little further down in 1 Corinthians 16. And, like, for example, verse 15, I beseech you, brethren, the house of Stephanas, and these types of things and here in 1 Corinthians 16:19, the churches of Asia salute you. Aquila and Priscilla salute you much in the Lord, with the church that is in their house. This was all to be done in the privacy of these people's homes. And Paul never advocated to be doing these types of things on the Sabbath day, but that everything would be done prior to his coming to collect any type of charity work and these types of things, clothing, food, and these types of things. So It's pretty simple. It's laid out for you. It's not that complicated, folks. So the fact is that there was a Sabbath commandment, and they kept it. And upon the first day of the week, just like it says, let every one of you lay by him in store, as God hath prospered him, that there be no gatherings when I come. Okay? This was not to be a public affair, inside of a church building, So, again, the second part of the Greek word is the pronoun him. Therefore, something is being laid alongside oneself. What Paul is doing is he's instructing each disciple to lay something away at home, storing it every first day of or after the Sabbath. Okay, he's not telling Christians to bring their money into church on Sundays and drop it in a collection plate. Okay, lay by him in store means to store goods by yourself at home. And the collections are of those goods to give to those that are stricken in poverty. A cheerful giver. Okay? This is not something that's supposed to be lawful. This is just, this should be an attribute of the Holy Spirit dwelling in you, that, you give because you want to give, not because it's being forced upon you. It's just like the whole aspect of the redistribution of wealth and these types of things, and how, tax dollars are being used to support these charities and these types of things, and redistribution of wealth taken from one and given to the other. You're being forced on that. It's not about that, okay? This is supposed to be something that we as true Christians should be willing to give freely, not in a public sphere, not announcing it to the world, not to make yourself known. It's not about that. Not to make yourself known of things that you need in order to supply others' needs. It's not about that. This is about the individual storing things at home and in giving out of a cheerful heart. And then obviously, Paul is instructing each disciple to lay something away at home, storing it every first day of or after the Sabbath. Again, he's not telling Christians to bring money into a church on Sundays and drop it in a collection plate. All right? This lay by him in a store means to store goods by yourself at home. The need was food and clothing, not money. Food and clothing. And this was not to be done on the Sabbath, but the first of or after the Sabbath. Okay? This storing of food and clothing out of a charity giving, out of loving giving, out of a loving heart, the preparation of this was not to be done on the Sabbath day because it was a time of rest. It was a time of restoration. Okay? That doesn't mean you don't, you see somebody struggling. That doesn't mean you don't help them on the Sabbath day. That's not what it's about. Okay? It's just a simple aspect that, this was a simple command that 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the seas, and everything in them is, and the seventh day he rested, and that is why we, I believe, are supposed to be observing or keeping this day separate. And again, the need of this was food and clothing. This was not to be done on the Sabbath, but the first day of or after the Sabbath. It had nothing to do with money. It had nothing to do with dropping change in a collection plate. It had nothing to do with sending money to outreach ministries or anything like that. This is about the individual, you, me, okay? What we are supposed to do. All right? Not to any outreach, not to any ministry, not to any online ministry or any of that nature. Okay? The need was food and clothing, not money. The need was food and clothing. Okay, so I figured I'd bring that up and clear that out. And, it had nothing to do with the church thing. And I want to bring you up a couple of quotes from History of the Sabbath, which I think is very interesting. Because a lot of people like to lay claim that True Christians were observing Sunday, around the 1st and 2nd century, which is, there might have been, but that doesn't mean they were true Christians. Okay? So I want to give you a quote out of History of the Sabbath, page 251, which states, "All depends now on the two authors, Hartman and Boehner, both of whom wrote in Latin. The passage referred to in Hartman's book reads thus, quote, the first church being composed of Jews, the established Sabbath observance remained with them for a time. For a time. Something started to change. And the apostles observed the Sabbath alone, visiting the synagogues on the Sabbath day to explain the gospel to the Gentiles. They spoke concerning sacred things every other day. However, we do not deny that Sunday was introduced in the middle of the apostolic age. Okay? And we can't deny that, because obviously it was. But it was introduced by those sects of Christians that, though they say they are Christians but are not, they are the synagogue of Satan. Okay? The Revelation mentions it plainly. The schools of the apostles and the older apologists mention it as having been introduced and kept for a long time, although its observance did not commence as long as Jerusalem stood. Okay, that's out of Historia Antiquitatum Ecclesiae, Hartman, page 386, 387. And also on page 249 of History of the Sabbath states, quote, the important historical fact that the Sabbath was extensively observed in crescendo for centuries afterward is passed by in silence, and the universal eternal claims of the divine law are ignored. Therefore, it is of considerable interest to see how church historians arrive at so widely differing statements. Neander and Mosheim will serve us well by way of illustration. Neander, father of modern church history, in perfect keeping with the above statement, says, quote, Sunday was distinguished as a day of joy by the circumstances that men did not fast upon it, and that they prayed standing up and not kneeling, as Christ had raised through his resurrection. The festival, see, this is what it was. It's just a festival. It was a human ordinance. It had nothing to do. Christ, the apostles never ordained this day, never sanctified this day. Christ never sanctified this day. God, the Father, never sanctified this day. These people are doing this out of their own tradition. It was a festival. Like all other festivals, were always only a human ordinance. Okay? Just like the Mosaic Law, the ceremonial law. Alright? And what did First Colossians say? Taking out the handwriting of ordinances which was against us. So really, what is more burdensome here? The ordinances or the commandments of God? The ordinances are more burdensome. This is more burdensome. Like all other festivals, was always only a human ordinance, and it was from the intentions of the apostles to establish a divine command in this respect, far from them, and from the early apostolic church to transfer the laws of the Sabbath to Sunday. The apostles never gave this order. The apostles never recognized this order. Jesus Christ never recognized this transfer at all. Perhaps at the end of the 2nd century, a false application of this kind had begun to take place, for men appeared by that time to have considered laboring on Sunday as a sin. During the time of the 2nd century. So you can see where this whole changing of the guard from the 7th day of the week to the 1st day of the week started at a very early time in the 2nd century. But at the same time, it was nothing but a human ordinance of human tradition. Okay? So you cannot sit there and say that Christians keep Sunday as a sacred day because that's when Jesus Christ resurrected. Jesus Christ never sanctified that day. Jesus Christ never said you must remember this day as a memorial for my resurrection. The apostles never recognized this day. This was a man-made concoction taken from Gnostic fathers, Gnostic writings, like Barnabas, which is not, when you read about the book of Barnabas, you'll come to find out that it was a forgery document. It was a document that was made up. No one knows who the author was. And the aspect of Sunday was Gnostic in nature. These church fathers that everyone loves to quote believed in the aspect of human ordinance and traditions. Okay? And Jesus Christ said, you keep the commandments of God by your own traditions. And it hasn't, this is not supposed to be about tradition. Okay, so I just wanted to bring that point out because in the next video that I do here in the next day or so, we're going to be covering extensively regarding this much debated fourth commandment. And we're going to go over the aspect of people being put to death for violating the Sabbath and these types of things. All I got to say about that is go back to the Garden of Eden. Okay? Go back to the Garden of Eden. When God warned Adam and Eve not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for they shall surely die. Okay? This was a simple aspect of disobedience. Not that they would die in the flesh, but spiritually they would be separated from God. They would be spiritually dead. So when you see, like in Exodus 31:15, you got to understand the aspect of typology. What is the type and what is the antitype here? 6 days may work be done, but in the seventh is a Sabbath of rest, holy to the Lord. Whosoever doeth any work on the Sabbath day, in the Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death. Okay, this is now obviously in this time, and Paul says that these things were written for our examples. We don't put people to death. So what is this talking about? It is talking about a spiritual death. A spiritual death for disobeying the Creator who created everything. Okay? That's what it is. That's what it is. It's just that simple. So, and we're going to get more into that because there's a lot of interesting things to consider regarding this. I don't really do too many videos regarding the fourth day of the week, but sometimes, once in a while, I like to come out with a study here and there because it really brings out certain things, and we're going to be getting into those certain things here in the following video preceding this one. So, thank you for listening. Truth be told, truth be known. Stay safe. God bless. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.